Welcome to our Spring Boot tutorial. In today's video, we'll learn the basics of pom.xml. Let's understand what is pom.xml. At the heart of every Maven project is the pom.xml file. POM stands for Project Object Model. This XML file contains information about the project and configuration details used by Maven to build the project. The pom.xml file is a fundamental part of a project managed by Maven, which is a build automation tool used primarily for Java projects. The pom.xml file contains information about the project and configuration details used by Maven to build the project. It stands for Project Object Model and is written in XML. Let's break down the pom.xml file. It includes fundamental project information, dependencies, plugins, goals, and build profiles, etc. Let's understand each one by one. Project root. The root element of a pom.xml file must be project. This element also includes the XML namespace and schema location to validate the POM file. modelVersion. The modelVersion element in a Maven pom.xml file specifies the version of the project object model schema that the file adheres to. This element is crucial as it defines the structure and rules that the pom.xml file must follow. The modelVersion element should always be the first element in the pom.xml file, and its value indicates which version of the POM schema is being used. For Maven 2 and 3, this is usually 4.0.0. groupId. The groupId element in a Maven pom.xml file specifies the unique identifier for the group or organization that owns the project. It helps to differentiate projects that have similar artifact IDs but belong to different organizations or groups. The groupId typically follows the reverse domain name convention to ensure uniqueness. For example, if your organization's domain is example.com, you would use com.example. This convention helps prevent naming conflicts between different organizations' artifacts in the Maven repository. artifactId. The artifactId element in a Maven pom.xml file specifies the unique identifier for the project. It represents the name of the project. The artifactId is an essential part of the coordinates used to identify and locate artifacts in Maven repositories. The artifactId is often used as the name of the project directory within the Maven repository and as the name of the jar file when the project is packaged. It's important to choose a meaningful and unique artifact ID for your project to avoid naming conflicts with other artifacts. Version specifies the version of the project. Maven supports fixed versions or dynamic versions. The version element in a Maven pom.xml file specifies the version of the artifact being built. It indicates the current release or iteration of the artifact. The version number follows a specific format, usually in the form of major.minor.patch or major.minor.patch.qualifier. Major represents significant changes that may not be backward compatible. Minor represents backward compatible new features or enhancements. Patch represents backward compatible bug fixes. The combination of groupId, artifactId, and version uniquely identifies the artifact in the Maven repository. For example, the fully qualified name of the artifact would be com.example, example project, 1.0.0. Packaging. The packaging element in a Maven pom.xml file specifies the type of artifact that the project produces when it is built. It defines the format in which the project's compiled code and resources are packaged. The packaging type determines how the artifact will be generated and treated by Maven during the build process. Common values include jar, war, and pom. If we specify the value of packaging as jar, then it produces a jar file containing compiled code and resources. This is the default packaging type for Java projects. If we specify the value of packaging as war, then it produces a war file containing a web application that can be deployed to a servlet container, such as Apache Tomcat. If we specify the value of packaging as POM, then it indicates that the current project is a parent or aggregator project and it does not produce an artifact of its own. Instead, it serves as a container for other modules. Dependencies. Dependencies in a Maven pom.xml file specify external libraries or modules required by the project for compilation, testing, or execution. Maven manages dependencies by downloading them from remote repositories and including them in the project's build path. Each dependency is specified with groupId, artifactId, and version. When Maven builds the project, it automatically resolves these dependencies by downloading the required jar files from configured repositories and including them in the project's class path. To obtain the exact groupId and artifactId, you can either visit the official website of the jar you need or open the Maven repository website. Open your browser and search for Maven repository, then open the first link. Here, you can search for any required jar. For example, if you need the Apache Commons Lang jar, type it in the search bar and press enter. It will display all jars related to this. Click on the required jar file. Here, you will find a list of all versions of this jar. Select any of them according to your requirements. When you click on a version, you will find the dependency XML for this jar. Copy and paste the same into your pom.xml, then reload the pom. Properties. In a Maven pom.xml file, the properties element is used to define project-specific properties that can be referenced and reused throughout the file. Properties provide a way to centralize and manage configuration values, making it easier to maintain and customize the build process. Build. In a Maven pom.xml file, the build element is used to configure the build process for the project. It contains settings and configurations related to compiling source code, packaging the project, running tests, and other build-related tasks. Modules. In a Maven multi-module project, the modules element in the parent pom.xml file is used to define a list of submodules or child projects that are part of the parent project. This allows you to organize related projects into a single multi-module project where each submodule represents a distinct component or module of the overall system. Each submodule listed in the Modules section corresponds to a directory within the parent project's directory structure. By default, Maven expects each submodule to have its own pom.xml file and directory structure, similar to that of a standalone Maven project. With multi-module projects, you can define relationships and dependencies between submodules, allowing you to build and manage them together as a cohesive unit. This is particularly useful for large-scale projects where different components/modules need to be developed, tested, and deployed together. Using multi-module projects helps promote code reuse, modularity, and maintainability, as well as providing better organization and structure for complex projects. It also simplifies the build process by allowing you to build and manage multiple related projects with a single Maven command. Profiles. In a Maven pom.xml file, profiles allow you to define sets of configurations that can be activated under specific conditions. Profiles are useful for customizing the build process based on different environments, project requirements, or user preferences. Profiles element contains a list of profile elements, each representing a specific profile. Profile element specifies the configuration for a particular profile. ID element is unique identifier for the profile. Properties element allows you to define properties specific to the profile. Build element contains build-related configurations that are specific to the profile. Profiles can be activated in various ways, such as through command line options, environment variables, or by specifying default activation conditions. For example, you can activate a profile named dev by using the p command line option. Repository management specifies repositories for downloading dependencies not present in the central Maven repository. Repository management in a Maven pom.xml file involves specifying remote repositories from which Maven can download project dependencies. Maven repositories serve as central locations where project artifacts are stored and can be easily accessed by Maven during the build process. Repositories element contains a list of repository elements, each specifying a remote repository. Repository element specifies a remote repository from which Maven can download dependencies. ID element is unique identifier for the repository. URL element contains URL of the repository. By default, Maven includes the central repository, https://repo.maven.apache.org/maven2, as the primary repository for downloading dependencies. However, you can add additional repositories as needed, such as custom or third-party repositories. Adding custom repositories allows you to access dependencies that are not available in the central repository or to override existing artifacts with custom versions. This is useful when working with internal or proprietary libraries or when using snapshot versions of dependencies. Distribution management. Distribution management in a Maven pom.xml file involves configuring how built artifacts, example, jar files, or files, are deployed and distributed to remote repositories or servers. It allows you to specify where and how Maven should deploy the project's artifacts after they have been built. Distribution management element contains configuration related to the distribution of built artifacts. Repository element specifies the repository where release artifacts should be deployed. ID element contain unique identifier for the repository. URL element contain URL of the repository where release artifacts will be deployed. Snapshot repository element specifies the repository where snapshot artifacts should be deployed. Snapshot artifacts are versions under active development and may change frequently. ID element contain unique identifier for the snapshot repository. URL element contains URL of the repository where snapshot artifacts will be deployed. By default, Maven uses the local repository /m2/repository to store built artifacts. However, you can configure distribution management to deploy artifacts to remote repositories, such as artifactory or custom servers. When you run mvn deploy, Maven packages the project's artifacts and deploys them to the specified repositories based on the configuration in the pom.xml file. Distribution management is particularly useful for releasing project versions, making them available to other projects or developers who depend on them. It ensures that artifacts are deployed to the correct locations with proper versioning and metadata, facilitating reliable artifact management and sharing. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest tutorials.